Imagine that you're on a steamy date. Things are hot and heavy. Everything's going just the way you want it to. When suddenly, your mind goes blank, horribly blank. You can't think of what to say next. Do what I do. Pop out Pericles, that classical political leader from the golden age of Athens. That's a panty dropper, I assure you. The evolution of democracy itself. Everything that man did, urging the ultimate accolade from historians, the age of Pericles. Why? Because he stirred all the crises that Athens faced, and solved them, and even they all forgave him smash and grab of the Delian League's treasury, which was the NATO of their day, to build the Acropolis and the Parthenon, which looks just suspiciously just like our Supreme Court building. Well, you know, the Trump administration, they probably think, well, those Greeks are a bunch of dirty brown foreigners anyway. They probably stole the designs from our Supreme Court building. Yeah, I'm sure. Bring up Pericles. It'll make your date really hot and heavy. That's the age of Pericles. But what do we have? We have the age of Donald Trump. Yes, the age of Donald Trump. Donald J. Trump, where he surrounds himself with little sycophants like that daughter of his, says, "Oh, Daddy, you're the best. You're the best president, the bestest president in the history of the world. You should get 2 scoops of ice cream, Daddy, for every night, for everything that you're doing. Daddy, we should rename Mount Rushmore into Mount Trumpmore and make maybe just a few design changes." Yes, when you surround yourself with people like that, you might actually start to believe that you are the bestest president in the history of the world, because he stares boldly, tackling the crises facing this nation and tackling one by one, like Pericles did? No. We have crises. I mean, we have cancer, we have AIDS, and this is a country that, eradicated, smallpox, measles, yellow fever, polio. If it didn't wipe it out completely, they managed it. What happened? Why are we still struggling with these diseases and a whole host of other ones? Well, probably because he's still sitting in the Oval Office trying to figure out how to beat the rap. And then we have, of course, our mounting gun assaults, right, over last year. And as if last year weren't horrific enough. And then we have, climate change. That's a tough one on that one, right? You know, he just helped us grow our carbon footprint by 3.5% last year, at a time when we're supposed to be shrinking it to save the future of this planet. Yes, we have our crises, but he's not facing them because he's so busy inventing new ones that he can understand, right? He started, remember the whole voter fraud thing, the way that at the very beginning he just freaked us all out like a month before the election and said, if I don't win, then the election is clearly rigged against me. And made us all go, eek, are we going to have a constitutional crisis on our hands? Of course, we all know now that he was playing a straight out of the Paul Manafort playbook that guy honed in Ukraine. See, what you do is you accuse your opponent of precisely what you're doing, rigging an election, right? And after the election, though, when he actually did win, because 10% of the Democrats freaked themselves out at nominating a woman to run this country and so decided to sit it out, Trump did win. He couldn't really claim that it was rigged anymore. He needed something else to get his name in the papers, a crisis that he could understand. So he started claiming that millions of voters, he would have won the popular vote if all those brownskins didn't come over the border and south of the border and get, paid by George Soros to put on buses and bust all the way up to New Hampshire to vote for Hillary against Donald J. Trump. That it was fraud of far-reaching implications. So, in fact, we should have a presidential commission, which he appointed, which found diddly, squat, zero, zip, nada, zilch. Yeah, he rode that for a while. And he wrote that imaginary crisis until he could ride it no further. Then he went back to that whole border thing. And he thought, that worked really well for me. Maybe I should start hyping that wall, right? He needed a new crisis. A new crisis that would make his opponents run in circles, chasing their tails, and get his name in the papers every day. Because that's really what his life is like. He just sits around the White House all day. He's just stuffing himself with cheeseburgers and his ice cream and watching himself on TV and calling his friends, ranting about how cool he looks because they do answer his phone now because he is the president of the United States. And instead of being the greatest president of the United States, we have this sort of like incredible shrinking presidency. Have you noticed that? Right. So the border wall, because there's this caravan that's coming. And here it comes. It's 2,000. No, it's 5,000. There's 7,000. There's 10,000. And they're bringing diseases and weaponizing the diseases. It's an act of war. And then the election comes, and then suddenly, where did that caravan go? Oh, well, it turned around because, the wall, which we don't have, but we do have, but we don't have, that made it go away. Right. Yeah, that's sort of making sense to me, right? It's like, I don't think anybody really believes that except for the MAGA folks, who I think he's sort of like their weather god. I mean, they could it could be like raining, thunder showers outside, and they would go outside and say, it's not raining because, Daddy said it's not. I'm not getting wet. And if you point out, well, they're soaked to the skin, they say, well, no, that's just fake news. Right? So he rode the border wall until Nancy Pelosi kicked his ass, and now he's in search of a third big crisis he can ride out for the next year. And guess what it's going to be? Abortion. He discovered that there are late-term abortions in this country, didn't he? Yes, he brought it up at the State of the Union. Well, here's the thing. 90% of all abortions occur within those first 3 months, which is where most Americans figure that's where, that's sort of like the deadline. And only 1% of them happen in the final months, right? That's the law. That's Roe versus Wade. But he has to have this late-term abortion ban, which he's not going to get. But it's another crisis that he can ride until he rides it to the very end as exhaustion and then play yet another card. Because that's the Trump presidency, the incredible shrinking presidency of Trump's imaginary crises. So what do we do about all this? Well, since he spends all of his time dreaming up imaginary crises, why don't we do a little imagining of our own? I want you to pour yourself a glass of really great wine, get your best chocolate, sit down in your cozy spot, and dream up an entirely new presidency, one that actually does things